Okay, let's start. Am I audible?
Yep, I can hear you anyway. Yep.
Okay, but you are not. Pete, you are trying to say something, but you are not audible.
I said that you're audible. Hopefully I'm audible.
Yeah, now you are audible. Okay,
Right, okay.
thanks. Okay. Uh, uh, so we created a simple presentation, right? We created a very simple presentation. But what is the behavior? This doesn't have a behavior. This doesn't have a state, right? So how do you create a component with its own behavior, its own state, and the presentation as well? Okay. So we'll see a very basic example, and then we'll solve the salary calculator for component composition, and then we'll take a small problem that will help us better understand why we cannot keep the state in the component, right? So why we should not keep the state in the component. All right. So let's create a simple greeter application, greeter page. So this will take the username from the user and then create a message, a personalized greet message, and display it to the user. Okay, so let's do that. 204 greeter.html and HTML equal 5 greeter, right? React.development.js and react-dom.development.js and babel.min.js. Okay, and then we'll have a script type equal to /babel. Okay, and let's say hash root. This is where we want to render. So what is that we want? I want h1, hr, a label, and username, and text button with value equal to greet, and a div where we will display the greet message, right? So this is what I want to render. So I'll take this and create a component, right? So when you want to create a view with its own state, behavior, and presentation, right, we call it as a component. So what we did in the previous example is only the presentation. This is only the presentation part. It doesn't have any behavior, right? Behavior is what? Reacting to user actions. How do you handle click event? How do you respond to text box change event, right? This doesn't have any of that. So all it has is just the plain simple presentation. We tried only the plain presentation. But if I want the behavior also to be implemented as a part of the component, then how do I do that, right? So that is where the component comes into picture. Okay. So what is a component? A component is just a class. So class is, you can create a component as a class. There are also other ways of creating a component. I'll explain. But for now, we will create a component as a class. So the greeter extends, right, React.component. Right? What makes a class a component? If the class inherits from React.component, then the class can be treated as a component. It has to inherit from React.component. Okay, very good. So what all this will have? This will have the state and presentation and behavior. Right? This will have the state, presentation, and behavior. But don't misunderstand the state. This state is the UI states. This should be the UI state. This should be the UI behavior, right? So presentation is anyway UI, and this should be the UI behavior. Okay. So now let us see how we want to present something. So how will I say this is what I want to present? Whatever you want to present has to be returned from a render method, right? So what is this render method? This is a lifecycle method which React will call when the component has to be rendered, right? It is one of the lifecycle methods which React will call when the component has to be rendered. Okay, very good. Now this has to be returned. So I'll say return, and we know very well that each of these are React elements. Each of these are React elements. So if these are React elements, React objects, plain simple JavaScript object, right? So anything that you write in your JSX is JavaScript, plain simple JavaScript object. So if they are JavaScript objects, can I return more than one object, one JavaScript object from a function? Definitely you cannot. So what do you have to do? You have to wrap it inside one another object. So let's have a div, right? That is why you have to always return a root element from your React component. The reason is simply because what you return is a JavaScript object, and you cannot return more than one object from a method. Okay, so you return this, and there are a few more things that we need to remember. What are they? Number one, every open tag must have a close tag. So the HR has to be closed, the input tag has to be closed, button has to be closed. So this is one difference. Every open tag must have a close tag. And then the other difference is, remember that these are all converted into JavaScript, and in JavaScript the word for has a completely different meaning altogether, right? The for is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, so you cannot have for in JSX. So the equivalent of for in JSX is HTML for, right? The equivalent of for in JSX is HTML for. And let's say we have a style. So let us define a style, and I will say highlight, and font size is 18 points, and color is blue color, right? And I want to define this CSS class for this particular div. So you can now, in normal HTML you will say class equal to highlight, right? But if it is JSX, this will be converted into React.create element, and the class will become the attribute of the props object. And so you cannot have the word class in JavaScript. Class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. You cannot have the word class in JavaScript. So what do you have? What is the equivalent? The equivalent is class name, right? The equivalent is class name, and I want to render this. How will I render this? I'll say React dot render and React dot create element of creator, and render it where? Document dot get element by id of root. Document dot get element by id of root. Okay. Now let's say 04 greeter.html. There you go, right? Your component is rendered. Your component is rendered. Now, instead of saying React.create element of greeter, what is the shortcut for this? The shortcut for this is greeter, right? We can use JSX to define the shortcut, and that will also be rendered exactly. Very good. Now, I want this to change dynamically, right? I want this to change dynamically. So let us define this as a variable. So Control X and paste it here. We'll say let or constant. Okay, guys, should I talk about ES6, or you are familiar with ES6?
Yep, talk about. I'm happy to hear about. If everyone else is.
Okay, others?
I was going to say, sorry, I may lack context for what we're talking about, but we do most of our stuff in TypeScript, so is not quite a lot of this stuff written by that.
See, TypeScript is a superset of ES6.
Right, sure.
So,
So from my point of view, the stuff that makes sense for TypeScript would make sense. Yeah, if it doesn't make sense for TypeScript, then it wouldn't do.
yeah. For example, arrow functions, array destructuring, object destructuring,
Yeah.
and classes, right?
Yeah.
And symbols, the idea behind symbols. Right. Okay. Um, okay. So I'm going to suspend the discussion on this a little while for at least 15 minutes, and then we will look at ES6 features, right? And then we will move on to that greater example once again. So what is this? What is ES6? So ES6 is the major enhancement to JavaScript. Okay, so after the ES5, it was one of the first major enhancement to JavaScript when people realized that JavaScript is not uh, feature rich for building complex applications. You can use JavaScript as it is for data validations and DOM manipulations in the browser, but it is very difficult to use JavaScript as it is to build complex applications. So when people realized that, okay, so what they did, they enhanced JavaScript to add a lot of features so that complex applications for the browser and as well as for the server, building these applications becomes a lot more easier. So they added a lot of features, but we are going to discuss some of the features that we will depend on again and again and again in our applications. So what are they? Number one. Variable declarations, right? So they introduced two more ways of declaring variables. One is called let, the other one is called constant. Okay, two more ways of declaring variables. One is called let, the other one is called a constant. So what makes the difference? Let. So what is the problem with var? What is the problem with var? Right? When you declare a variable using var, it is not block scoped. Right? A variable declared using var is not block scoped. What I mean by is not block scoped. For example, in other languages like Java or C Sharp, if you write a loop, right, I equal to 0, I less than 10, and I plus plus, you create a loop, and after the loop is executed, will you have access to the variable I? No, right? In other languages, you won't. Whereas in JavaScript, you will. Why? Because if you declare a variable using var, it is not block scoped. Then what is the scope? Any surrounding scope. It can be a function, it can be global, it can be any other surrounding scope, but it is not block scoped. Okay, and that led to a lot of problems, a lot of bugs in JavaScript. So of course, they could have changed the existing behavior of var, but that would break a lot of existing, millions and millions of existing pages and applications. So they didn't want to risk that. So they introduced a new way of declaring variables. It is called let. Okay. So when you declare a variable using let, it is block scoped. Right? So you run the loop, and after the loop is executed, if you try to access the variable I, it will throw an error. Okay, it says it is not there, undefined. So if you are using ES6, you should declare your variable only using let. You should not declare your variables using var. Right? You should never use var if you are building your application in ES6. The next one is constant. Constant is the same. So constant, same in other languages, y equal to 3.14, and try to change it, it will throw an error. Okay, so the same meaning as in other languages. So this is variable declarations. The next one is array destructuring. Okay, array destructuring. So what is the idea? The idea is make the language more declarative. Instead of making it more imperative, make the language more declarative. So how is this going to help? So let us look at, let's say you have an array of numbers, 3, 1, 5, 2, 4. Let's say we have an array of numbers, and I want to take the first two values in two different variables. right? I want to take the first two values in two different variables. So how do I do that? Usually you will say x equal to numbers of 0, comma y equal to numbers of 1, right? That is what we would do. But right, but instead of expressing it so imperatively, I want to express my intent in a much more declarative way. Like what? I want to say x comma y equal to numbers, just the array, and I am expecting the language runtime to understand the fact that I want to extract the values from the array and assign to x and y. But unfortunately, right, our intent is not expressed in an unambiguous way. This is very, very ambiguous. Why? This can be interpreted as we want the array to be assigned to the variable y and x to be left with undefined. Right? The language can very well interpret like this. So there has to be an unambiguous way of communicating that we want the values from the array to be extracted and assigned to x and y. So how do you do that? So they introduced a new syntax. What is it? Because we want to take the values from an array, you wrap the variables within square brackets. Right? Now x is 3 and y is 1. Okay, so the variable list is wrapped in a square brackets to tell the runtime that your intent here is to take the data from the array and as extract it and spread it to x and y. Right, and this feature is not new. I have seen this feature in other languages, and 15 years ago when I came across Python, right, I was amazed at the Python language just by seeing this expression. What was it? Usually when we want to swap the values of two different variables, right? When we want to swap the values of two different variables, we use a third variable, right? Temp equal to x, x equal to y, y equal to temp. So we use a third variable. But when you are using object destructuring, you don't have to use a third variable, right? You can say x comma y is equal to y comma x, right? Now x is 1, y is 3. Earlier x was 3, y was 1. Now x is 1, y is 3, right? What do you call a simple use case of array destructuring. Okay, so we are extracting data from an array into individual variables in one shot. Instead of doing it one after another, we are doing it in one shot. Okay, so this is array destructuring. And when we are doing destructuring, we can also use the rest operator. So the rest operator for the array. What do you mean by rest operator? Let us take the same array once again. And I want to take the first two values in two different variables and the remaining values in another variable. Right? The remaining values in another variable. So how do I do that? Where x comma y equal to numbers, but apart from that, I want the rest of the values. So dot 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 z. Right? The rest operator should be the last value there. Okay. So dot 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 z. And now x is 3, y is 1, and z is 5, 2, and 4. Okay, the rest of the values. So we are using 3 dots, not because there are 3 values, it is always 3 dots. Okay, it is always 3 dots. Okay, so this is about the rest operator. Now, the next one is the spread operator. The idea is if you use the dot 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 on the left hand side of the expression, it is called as the rest operator. If you use the dot 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 on the right hand side of the expression, it is called as a spread operator. Why would I use it on the right hand side of the expression? I'll show you. So let's say we have this array and I want to create a new array with all the values of the numbers array plus a few more values. So how do I do that? Usually you will say numbers.concat, etc. But instead you can make it a lot more simple. So you can say dot 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 numbers. Basically here what I'm saying is spread the values of the array here, right? Don't have it as it is, don't have the array as it is, spread the value of the array into a new a list of values into this array, and then you can have other values as well. Okay, so now new numbers is 3, 1, 5, 2, 4, 10, 20 and 30, right? So this is the spread operator. So in the case of the rest operator, we used dot 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 on the left hand side of the expression. In the case of the spread operator, we use the dot 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 on the right hand side of the expression. We are using it on the right hand side of the expression. And initially in ES6, these features were available only for the array, but subsequently they were made as these features were available for objects as well, right? Not just for the array, but for objects as well. How? I'll show you. So let us say we have an object, EMP object, that has ID and name and salary, right? A very basic object. And I want to take ID and salary in two different variables, or name and salary, whichever variable, whichever attribute you want to take, you can take it. But I am as of now, for example, I want to take the extract ID and salary in two different variables. So usually what we would do, we will say ID equal to emp.id, comma name equal to emp.name, right? You don't have to say this so elaborately. What you can do, you can express your intent in a much more straightforward way. How? In a declarative way. ID comma name equal to emp. But this can lead to ambiguous interpretation. So we want to be able to communicate in such a way that it is unambiguous. How? Because we want to take the values from an object, we can wrap the variables within floor brackets. We can wrap the variables within floor brackets, and now you have ID in 100 and name in Magesh. Now here the values are extracted based on the attribute names. Okay, so the position doesn't matter. So if you have this object, you can say salary comma ID. Right, now salary is 10,000, ID is 100. So it doesn't matter, the order doesn't matter, the name matters because it extracts the value based on the name. Okay, so does it mean that the attribute names should match the variable names, or the variable names should match the attribute names? Not necessarily. If you want the variable names to be different from the attribute names, that is also possible. How? Here is our object, and you can say salary colon X and ID colon Y, right? Now X is 10,000 and Y is 100. Okay, so you can extract the data in different variable names as well. They need not always be the same variable name. They can also be different variable name as well. Okay, so this is object destructuring, and you can also use the rest operator here as well. How? You can say where salary is X and dot 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 Z equal to EMP. So X contains the salary and Z contains ID and name. The rest of the attributes from the object, they're all available in the Z variable. Now this is the rest operator. Now you can also use the spread operator. So what is the idea behind spread operator? Spread operator is, let's say you create a new employee object with all the attributes of EMP, dot 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 EMP, and the new attributes, right? For example, benefits is healthcare, right? Now, if you look at what is new EMP, it has an ID, name, salary, and benefits. It has ID, name, salary, and benefits, right? So this is your new object. So this is the rest operator and spread operator for objects. The next one is default arguments. So these features we will use heavily when we are dealing with Redux. Okay, all right. So what are default arguments? Let's say we have a function add of x comma y, return x plus y, right? Now if I invoke this function with no values for x and y, if I invoke this function with no values for x and y, then x will be undefined, y will be undefined, right? X will be undefined and y will be undefined. I don't want that. I don't want that. I want x and y to take some default values if the user is invoking the function with no arguments. So how do I do that? You define the default values right in the parameter list. So add of x equal to 10 and y equal to 20. Now you invoke it with no arguments, you get 30. Invoke it with 100, you get 120. Invoke it with undefined comma 200, you will get 210. Invoke it with 100 comma 200, you will get 300. So basically, if the parameter value is undefined, then it will take the default value given. Right? If the parameter value is undefined, it will consider the default value given. So this is what we call as default arguments. Right? Guys, are you following? Okay, good. Thank you. All right.
Yep.
So the next one is arrow functions. Right? Arrow functions. So what is the idea behind arrow functions? Arrow functions are another way by which you can create a function. Now, for example, in JavaScript, you can create a function as a function statement. What is a function statement? This is a function statement, right? Add of x comma y and return x plus y. This is a function statement. Now, the same thing can also be returned as a function expression, right? The same thing can also be written as a function expression. How? You can say expression is function where add equal to a function that takes x and y, returns x plus y. Right? There's a function expression. You create a function and then assign it to a variable. Now, when you create a function as a function expression, you don't have to always write it so elaborately. You can simplify writing it. How? You can say add equal to, instead of the function keyword, right? Instead of typing the function keyword, between the parameter list and the function body, you can use an arrow syntax, equal to greater than, what we call as a fat arrow, right? And you can say return x plus 1. Right? So this is what we have as lambda expression in Java, lambda expression in .NET, in almost all other languages also. Wherever you have the concept of higher order functions, you will find the concept of lambda expressions. Okay, so this is what it is. And if your function body contains only one expression that is being returned, if your function body contains only one expression that is being returned, the body does not contain multiple lines, right? It is just one expression that is being returned, then you don't have to write it like this. You can further simplify it. How? You can remove the flower brackets, you can remove the return statement, you can remove the open flower brackets, just give the expression as it is. So if you call add of 100 comma 200, it will give you 300. Type of add will be a function, right? Type of add is a function. So this is called as an arrow function. So if your function contains only one expression that is being returned, then just define the expression alone. You don't need the flower brackets, etc. Just define the function, the expression alone. If your function contains more than one line, then it has to be wrapped within flower brackets. Okay, so we will use this again and again and again in subsequent applications, in subsequent scenarios. So this is number one. Number two is the other advantage of an arrow function is it will retain the this context, right? It will retain the this context. What I mean by retained in this context, in JavaScript, right? That this context, you know, that this context is based on how the function is invoked, right? That this is based on how the function is invoked. So that is why it is called as an invocation context, the context with which the function is invoked, right? So how does it matter? For example, let's say we have a function, we have an object, enp equal to an object, when name is Magesh, and we say who am I is a function where we print console.log I am, comma, this dot name, right? If you call emp.whoami, it will print I am Magesh, no doubt. But let's say you take the whoami alone as a variable. So I'll say where whoami is equal to emp.whoami. Get the reference of the function. And now if you call whoami, right, it will print I am, oops, why? Okay. So it's because the name is already, the variable was already declared, right? So we have this, and then you say, well, who am I equal to? And now if you hit, come on, what's wrong? The values are retained. So that's actually in the global variable, that's all, nothing else. Okay, so let us take a new one. Now, now you call who am I, it prints I am empty string. Why? Because when you invoke a function in JavaScript, when you invoke a function as a normal function, this will be the global scope window. So by default, this context is based on how the function is invoked, right? By default, this context is based on how the function is invoked. So how do I prove that this, when you invoke a function as a normal function, that this refers to the global object? What you can do, you can have window.name equal to, by default, window.name is an empty string. That is why it is printing I am empty string. Okay, there is an empty string there. But you change this window.name equal to Chrome browser, right? Now you call who am I, it will print I am Chrome browser. You call emp.whoami, it will print I am Magesh. So there is only one function, but depending on how you invoke it, if you invoke it as a method of an object, then this will refer to the object. If you invoke it as a normal function, then this will refer to the global scope, right? Depending on how you invoke it, this context varies, right? Now, you don't have to worry about this. You can retain this context as it is, right, with the context of the object. How, let's say we have an object, the same object. Now, instead of writing it like this, assuming that this works, let us check. So I'm writing it as an arrow function. I'm writing it as an arrow function. Now, emp.whoami will print I am Chrome browser, and you say where who am I equal to emp.whoami. Now you invoke who am I. Oh, no. Why it prints I am Chrome browser? Oh, okay. There's an object, right? Let us write a class for this. So class employee, and here I say name is Magesh, and let us write a simple method. So who am I is an arrow function where we'll say console.log I am, comma, this dot name, right? So emp equal to new employee, create this, and then you call emp.whoami, it prints I am Magesh, and where whoami equal to emp.whoami, now you call whoami, it prints still I am Magesh, right? So that this context is retained. Irrespective of how you invoke it, this will refer to that particular object. Okay, so this is the benefit of using an arrow function. When you invoke it as a method reference, then this context will still be retained, right? This is another benefit of using an arrow function. So this is about arrow functions. The next one is template strings. So what is the idea behind template strings? Let's say in other languages, we have string formatters available, using which you can substitute some values in a string, right? JavaScript does not have one. For example, let's say you have two variables. So where x equal to 10 and y equal to 20. And you want to create a string that says value of x is 10 and value of y is 20. So how do I create that string? You say where x equal to, where s1 equal to value of x is, break the string, concatenate the value of x, and value of y is, break the string and concatenate the value of y. This is how you will typically do, right? Um, but here I am breaking the string and concatenating them. I am breaking the string and concatenating them. Is there a way by which I can achieve the same output without breaking the string? Right? Without breaking them. So in .NET, in C#, there is a string.format available using which you can do. In Java also there are string formatters available. Right? JavaScript did not have one for a long time, so they added that feature. How you create a string. First of all, it has to be wrapped within single backquote. Okay, so it's not single quote, it's not double quote, it is single backquote. The key is below the escape key in your keyboard. So single backquote, and then you say value of x is dollar floor brackets x, and value of y is dollar floor brackets y. Okay, value of x is dollar floor brackets x, and the value of y is dollar floor brackets y. That's all. So automatically, wherever we have dollar floor brackets, the respective variable value will be resolved and substituted. So S2 is the same output, but without breaking the string and concatenating them again and again and again. Now, what if I want to have strings in multiple lines, right? So if you want to have strings in multiple lines, you can break them. So now S2 is a string in multiple lines, right? So the template string syntax gives you two benefits. One, the variable values can be substituted. Number two, the strings can span across multiple lines. Okay, so this is another feature. The third one, the next one is symbols. Right? So what is a symbol? What is the idea behind a symbol? A symbol is a data type. A symbol is a new data type, and the speciality of symbol is that one instance of a symbol will not be equivalent to another instance. One instance of a symbol will not be equivalent to another instance. So let's say I have one symbol, right? So this is how I created capital S. So this is how I created. And if you look at what is S1, it says S1 is symbol. Type of S1 will be symbol. So the symbol is a data type. Okay. And as I said, its unique feature is one will not be equivalent to the other. So I'll say where S2 equal to another symbol. And then if you say S1 is equal to S2, it will say false, right? Because one is unique. Each symbol instance is unique. One will not be equivalent to the other, right? So what is the benefit? What is the use of this? When do I use this? Okay, in JavaScript, right? Typically, if you want to hide something, privacy involves a lot of cost, right? Privacy involves a lot of cost. Why so? Why privacy involves a lot of cost, right? Let us take a simple example. I'll explain through an example. Let's say I want to construct a spinner object, and so I'll call it as spinner, and how I create it, we can decide. But then the object must have the following behavior. What are they? It must have a method called up method, which when called, it should keep incrementing a value and return. And it should also have a method called down method, which when called, it should keep decrementing a value and return. Okay. And the most important thing is there should be no other way I can change the value of up and down, the outcome of up and down. There should be no way I should be able to change the outcome of up and down, right? So there are a couple of ways by which I can do. Number one is you can directly write it as an object, right? You can say where spinner equal to an object, and you can have a counter is 0 and up is a function, a method where you return plus plus counter, and down is another function where you return minus minus counter, right? So you can write it like this. So let me copy this, go to the browser, yeah, reload it, paste it. Now you call spinner.up, it will return, what's wrong? This dot counter, sorry. It is this dot counter, my mistake. Right? So you call spinner.up, it returns 1, and the spinner.down, it decrements it. No doubt about it. But the only problem is the counter is public. The counter is public. So how will I access it? I can say spinner.counter equal to 10,000. And now if you call spinner.up, it will return 10,001, 10,002. I don't want that to happen. Right? I don't want anyone to be able to influence the outcome of up and down. So if you cannot do this, then what is the solution? The solution is don't construct an object straight away. Use a closure to construct it. How? You say where spinner equal to an immediately invoked function expression, and here declare a variable where counter equal to 0, and then return an object that has an up function, up method that will have return plus plus counter, and similarly down is another method that will return minus minus counter. Okay, so this is how you construct a spinner object. Now let us check if this is working. Go back, reload, paste this. Now you call spinner.up, and up works just fine. Spinner.down works just fine. Now try to access the counter. There is no counter, it is undefined because the counter is not a part of the object. The counter is a variable on which a closure is created, right? So can't I say spinner.counter equal to 10,000? Of course you can, nothing stops you from doing it, but this will not have any impact on the up and down methods. So if you call down again, it will be -1, -2, -3. So it will not be able to do that. Right? You will not be able to influence the outcome of up and down from outside. Okay, very good. But this is an immediately invoked function expression, and you create only one instance of the spinner. What if I want to create multiple instances of the spinner? Right? If I want to create multiple instances of the spinner, then I can convert this into a named function. So here I will say this is spinner factory. Right? This is spinner factory, and you keep calling that function again and again and again. You will get multiple spinner objects. Okay, but the problem here is every time you create a spinner object, you create a new function again and again and again. So if you are creating 100 instances of spinner objects, you end up creating 100 instances of up function and 100 instances of down function. And in JavaScript, functions are also objects. Right? Functions are also objects. So they take space in the memory. So is there a way by which I can achieve the same output without creating so many instances of the functions? You can, and that is where classes comes into picture. The constructor functions comes into picture. So when you convert the same thing into a constructor function, it goes like this. So function spinner, right? Function spinner. This can have counter. This dot counter equal to 0, and then you can have the methods in the prototype. So prototype dot up equal to a function where return plus this dot counter. Similarly, spinner.prototype.dom equal to a function where you return minus this dot counter, minus this dot counter, right? So now what will happen when you create an instance of a spinner? You will not create multiple instances of up and down. You will not create multiple instances of up and down, but you will create only one instance of up and down attached to the prototype. But the same thing will be available to all the instances of spinner. So let me copy this, go here, paste it, reload, and give me 1 second, sorry.
Hi, sorry, are you deliberately muted? We can't hear you. Well, I can't hear you. I'm assuming nobody else can hear you either.
Hi, am I audible
you
now?
are now. Yeah, certainly. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, but you are not audible. Why?
You can't.
One second.
No.
I can hear other people, and I can hear Magesh. So.
Why am I not audible? Why are you not audible? Okay. Okay, but you are not audible to me. How do I fix this?
You still can't hear us? I can hear you.
No, it sounds like his audio is, or his output is muted or something. I don't know. Those fancy Bluetooth things. I don't know. Kids these days. What's wrong with a wire? You know, gets the job done.
Let's hold on 1 second. Am I audible now?
Certainly. Yeah, we?
Okay. All right, thank you. I think you are also audible. How long I muted myself? I think.
You after you did the prototype definition in the console and you pressed enter,
Okay.
and then it
Okay.
gave you the that input. Yeah, that
Got
output.
it. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Right. So here we created the prototype and we are creating an instance and it goes up and down. Now, what I was about to say was typically when you create a class like infrastructure in JavaScript, this is what we do. This is how we create, because we don't want to create multiple instances of the same function for each instance of the object. And a simple example that I was about to communicate was this array, right? So you create an array object and you say console.dir of the numbers array. You realize that the object as it is has only the data, but the methods are in the prototype, right? So why? The same reason. If you create 100 instances of an array, you don't have to create 100 instances of the slice method, map method, reduce method, find method, etc. One instance of them can be used to serve all the instances of the array object, right? But there is a minor problem here. What is the problem? The problem is the counter has to be public. The counter has to be public. It cannot be private. If you declare it as var, right, these methods will not be, these functions will not be able to access the counter variable. So what is the solution? So either you have to go for this approach where you have lesser memory footprint because you have the methods in the prototype, but you compromise. How? You make the counter public, or you make the counter private, but you create 100 instances of up and down, one for each instance of the spinner, right? So this is a trade-off. If you go for this, you can achieve privacy, but you have a larger memory footprint. If you go for this, then you achieve lesser memory footprint, but you compromise on the privacy, right? So how do I achieve both? I don't want to compromise one or the other. I want to achieve privacy and also have a lesser memory footprint, right? So this is one scenario where I have seen symbols are used a lot. What is it? One of the advantage of a spinner of a symbol is that symbols can also be an object attributes. For example, let's say we have a symbol, right? We have a symbol, and let's say we have an object, and I can have the symbol as an attribute. How? I can say obj of s equal to 100. Now, if you look at obj is an object with the attribute as a symbol and the value is 100. Now, how will I access this value? The only way you can access this value is with the help of the symbol yes. Okay, so only with the help of yes you can access. But if you have a symbol, another symbol, right? If you have another symbol, can I access using that symbol? No. Why? Because one instance of a symbol will never be equivalent to another instance of a symbol. It is kind of a memory address. Okay, so one instance will not be equivalent to the other, right? Now, if I deny access to yes, no one will be able to access this value. If I deny access to yes, no one will be able to access this value, right? So that is how I achieve privacy without compromising on the memory footprint. How? We will take the same thing, but we will wrap it inside an immediately invoke function expression, right? We'll wrap it inside an immediately invoke function expression and return the spinner here. But here I will have a symbol. Okay, so counter symbol is equal to symbol, just symbol. That's all. Now wherever I am using the counter, I will use of counter symbol. That's all, right? So this will help me achieve privacy and as well as lesser memory footprint. How? Watch this. Take this, go back here. Now if you create a spinner, so s equal to new spinner. Now you call s dot up, s dot up, s dot down, s dot down, right? It is working perfectly fine. And if you look at the object console.dir of s, you'll find that it is it, and it has the counter, and the proto has up and down, but you cannot access this. There is no way I can access it. There is no way I can change that value. Why? Because that is created as a closure. Okay, so I am able to get the best of both worlds. I am able to get lesser memory footprint and as well as achieve privacy, right? Without access to the actual symbol, I will not be able to access that value. Okay, so this is one of the very frequent use cases of symbols. Make sense? Any questions? Are we good?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll save this file. Take a few minutes, go through it, and let me know. Code is checked in. Take a few minutes. Are we good?
Yep, good from my side.
Okay. All right. So the next feature is classes. Right? You can create classes. So there are features that we will look at on the third day when we are Redux Saga. Okay. So these two we will on the last day, and let us look at classes. So class is basically a construct for creating a class in JavaScript, and in the absence of classes, we used to create class-like infrastructure using functions. We used to create class-like infrastructure using functions, and they simplified it with the help of classes. So how do I do that? You say class employee, and you can have class level variables. So ID equal to 0, name equal to empty string, and salary equal to 0. And then you can have methods, or first of all, so in other languages, right? So how do you create a constructor method? A constructor method is a method where the name of the method matches the name of the class, right? The name of the method matches the name of the class. Whereas in JavaScript, a constructor method is a method with the name constructor. Right? A constructor method is just a method with the name constructor. So you can use it for anything. You can use it for injecting dependencies. You can use it for initializing the class level variables. You can use it for anything. So we'll say ID, name, and salary, and you can say this dot ID equal to ID, this dot name equal to name, and then this dot salary equal to salary. Right? And then you can have methods. So you can say display is a method where I will say console.log id equal to $of this dot id, comma name equal to $of this dot name, and salary equal to $of this dot salary. Right? That's it. Now you can create an instance emp equal to new employee of 100, comma Makesh, comma 10,000, and emp is an object with id, name, and salary, and emp dot display will print id equal to 100, name equal to Makesh, salary equal to 10,000, etc. Right? So we created a class, but the only thing is, even though you create it as a class, if you look at what is type of employee, it is a function. Internally, it is represented as a function. So at the language level, nothing. I mean, sorry, at the runtime level, nothing has changed, right? The way you express how you want to create a class is changed. That's all, right? It is still internally a function. And if you look at console.dir of employee, you'll find that the methods are in the prototype. The prototype has the display method, right? Which is what usually we do whenever we want to create a constructor function. Methods are attached to the prototype. Right? So this is more or less the same thing. Okay. And how do I do inheritance? Inheritance is very simple. So you can say class full-time employee and extends employee, right? It is extends, and it can have its own class level variable. So you can say benefits is equal to an empty string, and create a constructor, and the constructor can take id, name, salary, and benefits. Now when you inherit one class from another class, right, the derived class in the constructor, before calling this, you have to initialize the base constructor. Okay, so before saying this dot benefits is equal to benefits, you have to call the base constructor. How? Using super. So super of, you can say id comma name comma salary, right? And that's it. So where ft equal to new full-time employee of 200 comma Suresh comma 20,000 comma healthcare, right? So ft is an object of type full-time employee with id name and salary and benefits. And if you say ft dot display, it will print id name and salary. Where is this coming from? Is the method is coming from the base class, employee class, right? So the only thing that you need to remember is what? The word, the keyword by which you inherit from one class is the extends keyword. And then when you inherit, the constructor method must call the base constructor, base class constructor, before it starts using before it starts referring to the current object. How? By calling super, right? By using super. That's all, right? So these are all some of the features that we will rely upon in our application development. But apart from this, there are a lot more features that are there in ES6, and spend some time. We don't have much time to discuss all those features. There is a fantastic website for all the ES6 features. So it is called es6-features.org. Okay, so there's a website, a beautiful website, explains all the ES6 features with fantastic examples. So spend some time, when time permits, go through them. Okay, and if there are any doubts, you let me know tomorrow, day after tomorrow, we will discuss. But otherwise, the discussion on ES6 is over now. Right? And the reason why we had to discuss ES6 is because when you are creating a component class, right? When you are creating a component when you are creating a component in ES6, it has to be a class, and then we will use the arrow functions to define the event handlers. Okay, so that is why it's important that we discuss ES6 now. Okay, very good. Now let us get back to our component. Okay, so here, what are the things? So let me revisit this once again. So the difference between HTML and JSX, what are they? Number one, all open tags must be closed. Number two, they use HTML for instead of for, and then use class name instead of class attribute. That's all. Okay, so yeah, one second, sorry. हाँ बोलिए. हाँ जाए 9:30. Thank you. All right, sorry. So these are all the differences between the HTML and JSX, right? So if you remember this, you can very easily convert every HTML fragment into a valid JSX. Okay, all open tags must be closed, and use HTML for instead of for, and use class name instead of class. Okay, that's all. And now let's come here. So here is our presentation. This is our presentation. Okay, very good. But I want this to be dynamic. I want this message to be dynamic. So you can have a class level variable. So you can say let greet message is equal to greet message. Okay, and then I want to display this here. I told you earlier, anything dynamic, wrap it within flower brackets. So here we will wrap this within flower brackets and say greet message. Save this and open it in the browser, reload it. It is working just fine. No errors. It is working just fine. or if you want, you can say dummy message or initial message, just to test if it is working. It is working just fine. Okay, very good. But then I want something to happen when the button is clicked, right? I want something to happen when the button is clicked. So how will I write that? You could write it as a method. So on greet click is equal to a method. Someone pinged me something. Yes, what is it? Sure, no problem. Right? So on greet click, I'm writing a method, and let's put a console.log. So console.log greet button clicked. Greet button clicked. Okay. But how will I communicate that I want this function to be executed when the button is clicked? Right? How will I communicate that I want this button to be executed when the button is clicked? So this function to be executed when the button is clicked. So what we do is in low level DOM, right? If you take a button, if you take this button, inspect and go to console, and if you take the button object, so this is our low level button object, and if you say console.dir of $0, you'll find that the object has a lot of attributes that starts with on, right? The object has a lot of attributes. The DOM object has a lot of attributes that starts with the word on. So these are all the various events that the control can respond to, react to, right? These are all the various DOM events that the control can react to or respond to. Okay. Now, what is the equivalent of this in JSX? This is in low level DOM, but what is the equivalent of this in JSX? Right? The same thing, the same thing. The only difference is you use a camel case. So on click, right? So here it is what? It is on click with all lowercase. On click all lowercase. Here on click with a capital C with a capital C, right? On click equal to refer to the function that you want to execute. So this dot on greet click. So here I am giving the reference of the function, right? I am giving the reference of the function, and let us check if this is working. Go to the browser, reload it, click the button, it is working. Greet button, click, right? It is working perfectly fine. Okay, very good. But then when the button is clicked, I want to change the greet message, right? When the button is clicked, I want to change the greet message. So how will you change the greet message when the button is clicked? So if I want to change the greet message, I should have access to that here. And if I should have access to the greet message here, it cannot be a local variable. Then what it has to be? It has to be a class level variable. So here we will have greet message equal to and dummy message, right? And because you are promoting it to a class level variable, you have to access it as this dot greet message. You have to access it as this dot greet message. Let us check if this is working. Go back, reload, no error, and click the greet button. This is working. Okay. Now, does it mean that I can change the greet message? Let us try. So greet message is equal to a new greet message. Right? Save this, go to the browser, reload it, click the button. It is not displaying. It is not displaying. But is it changing? Let us figure it out. So console.log this dot greet message. Right? Now save this, reload, click the button. It is printing a new greet message. So this is changing, but what is not happening? It is not displaying here. Right? It is not displaying here. How will we make it display? Now there are a couple of choices. Choice one, if it is in other frameworks, right? Other frameworks, other UI frameworks. Typically, what we will do, we will locate that particular DOM node and manipulate. We will locate this DOM node and then manipulate. But we are not following that approach in React. React follows an all-in-one approach. Anytime any changes, you have to render the whole stuff, right? So now this has changed. Now how will I render the whole component? Very simple. You don't have to render it. React will automatically render it. When it recognizes that the data has changed, the state has changed, right? And of course, this is changing. Then why is React not rendering? Simply because React doesn't render the whole component for every change. React doesn't render the whole component for every change. Instead, React gives you a choice saying that, hey, I don't want to render the whole component for every state change. You tell me what is the state which when changed, you want me to re-render the component. Right? What is the state which when changed, you want me to re-render the component. Right? So how do I communicate that? That is communicated through the state object. So the state is maintained in a class level variable using an attribute called a state. Okay, and that can have whatever name that you want to have, because you can have any number of state data, right? It is an object. Okay, very good. Now how will I access this now? So this is accessed as this dot state dot greet message, and when I want to assign a new value, you don't assign it directly to the state member, right? Why? Because if you directly update it, React will not be able to recognize whether it is changing or not, right? React will not be able to recognize if it is changing or not. You remember in our salary calculator, when we converted the this dot basic into a private member, we wanted to recognize when they were changing. We had to introduce setters and getters, right? So that our application can detect when the values were changing. So similarly, here also, if you can use the state object directly to read the value, but to write the value, you should not use the state object directly. What do you have to do? You have to use a setter. What is a setter? Set state, set state, and the member that you want to update. That's all. So now save this, go to the browser, reload it, and click the button. Now it is rendered. Now it is rendered. Guys, are you following? Shall I move on? I want to have a look at this before I move on. Okay. Others?
I'm all for keeping going. I don't know what anyone else is saying.
Okay. So I'll move on. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, how will I take the data from the text box? How will I take the data from the text box? Okay. So one way, there are a couple of ways, but the prescribed way of doing it is have a variable dedicated for the text box value. Have a variable dedicated for the text box value. So you can say username in the state, and then when the text box is changing, take the data from the event object and update it. So you can say on change is equal to, when given the event object, you say this dot set state of what? Username is event dot target dot value, right? Event dot target dot value. And so when the button is clicked, you create a message that is meaningful. So you can say hi $of this dot state dot username, comma, have a nice day, right? So I'm using this set state. Now save this. Sorry, I left the meeting. I joined back. Am I audible? Okay, good. Thank you. Right. So reload this and type Magesh and click greet. it prints hi Magesh. Say John, click read, it prints hi John. All right. So now we created a component. Oh, sorry. Present now. The screen is share. Better? Okay. Right. So a very basic component that has the presentation. The presentation is this, right? The behavior is this, and the state is this. Okay. So this is how we create a component in React. So it has the presentation, behavior, and as well as the state. Okay. So all of them are right here. Okay. Now this component is self-contained in the sense like it is not depending on any data from outside, right? It is not depending on any data from outside. Okay, what if it depends on some data from outside? How do I pass it? You pass them as props, right? For example, I don't want to hard code this message. I don't want to hard code this message. I want this data to be passed from outside. When I'm using the component, I want this to be passed. Why? Because in one part of my application, I want to display one greet message, and in another part of my application, I want to display another greet message, right? So how will I do that? How will I do that? So this, you can pass it as a prop. Okay. So when you have the greeter, here you can say template, greet template is equal to this, right? And you can pass any number of values, xyz equal to 100, abc equal to something. You can pass any number of values, but how will I access these values, right? So these are all available as props in the component. These are all available as props. So here we will say dollar of this dot props dot templates. This dot props dot template. That's all. So you do this automatically, the value will be substituted. Okay, that's all. Now save this, go to the browser, reload it, and type Magesh and click read. It works just fine. And now let's modify this. So instead of have a nice day, you say have a good day. Save this, go to the browser, reload it, and you say John and greet. It prints hi John, have a nice day. Right? Now you can have multiple instances of the greeter with different outputs. For example, I want to display two instances of the greeter. So I can say display a div. This is one greeter and a HR, or you can just say copy this and paste it, and this can have a nice day, and you can close this, right? So this xyz equal to 100 was meant for example, a simple example. Here we don't have any significant uh, meaning there, so I'm just going to get rid of it, reload it. There is another, what is error? Template comma is missing, comma. Now reload it. We have two greeters getting displayed. You type Magesh in one, it prints have a good day, and you type Magesh in another, it prints have a nice day, right? Because we are able to change the behavior of the component from outside using props, right? That's all. So this is what React is all about, right? So you encapsulate the state, the presentation, the behavior into a component and use that component so that whenever the data state changes, the component can be automatically re-rendered however you want. And customization of the component can be achieved with the help of props, right? How you send the data from outside. Okay, so this is pretty much 80% of React all about. Right? I'll show you how you do component composition in a while. Take a few minutes, go through this and let me know if you have any questions. Let me know once you're done. Okay, now we are going to solve salary calculator, and when we solve salary calculator using React, where will I keep the various parameters, basic, HI, DA and tax? Where will I keep them? Anyone? If I solve salary calculator in React, where will I keep the basic, HI, DA and tax? So let me say this as 05 salary calculator, and this call this as salary calculator. Okay, and get rid of this. This is salary calculator, and this will be replaced with something else. So what is it? We'll take it. This stuff. So copy this and paste it here. Okay, so I have pasted the whole stuff, and all classes become class name, and all for becomes HTML for, and all inputs become close, right? All inputs become close. Okay, very good. Now, where will I write the logic or basic HRD and tags? Can anyone guide me?
So are you not putting your various variables into your state and then
Very good.
and yeah, then then whatever
No,
follows
makes
from
sense.
that. So that's my and then. Yeah.
Makes sense, right? So you want to keep the basic HRDA tags in the state and take it and process, right? Who said that? Pete? Oh, okay, right? Now, for 3 hours, we discussed that non-UI state should not be in the view, right? Non-UI state should not be in the view. And what is basic HRDA and tags? These are non-UI. And what are React components? React components are views, right? React components are views. So can we have, so if we have basic HRDA and tags in the component, in the state variable, then where will we write the logic, calculation logic? We will write the calculation logic in the component, and component is a view. And you should not write non-UI behavior in the view, right? We discussed about it. That was the first discussion that we had, right? So first I'll show you what you should not do, and then I'll show you how we can fix it. So we can have a state variable, and the state can have basic 0, HRA 0, DA 0, tax 0, and the salary 0. And then you can have an on calculate click is a method where we will take all of them, constant basic comma HRA comma DA comma tax equal to this dot state, and then we will calculate. So constant gross is equal to basic plus HRA plus DA, and the constant net is equal to gross multiplied by 100 minus tax divided by 100, and then we will set it. So this dot set state of what? The salary is the net. And then when the data is changing, we will update them, right? We will update them. So on change is equal to, and given an event object, this dot set state of what? Some member colon event dot target dot value as number, right? Even dot target dot value as number. So what is this? This is basic. What is this? This is HRA. What is this? This is DA. What is this? This is tax. And on click, I will simply say on click equal to this dot on calculate click. And here we want to display all of them. So we will take the same thing. So constant basic comma HRA comma DA comma tax comma salary equal to this dot state. Take it from the state and you display it here. So okay, so render the calculator, no doubt about it. And one minor thing that we have to do is the tax range, right? If you give the value, it will not work. Why? I'll explain later. Okay, first let me show you. Here we are. Let me load the calculator. So 05 salary calculator.html. It is rendered. So let's have the style also. Right, I'm having the style, and here let's see. Okay, so reloaded. I got it in the more or less in the same view. Now I type 10,000, it is updated, 2,000 updated, 3,000 updated. But when I try to change the tax, range tax, right? See, this is changing, but this is not the tax value that you display changes, but this one is not changing, right? So why is it? I'll explain later. If you want that to work, then you change, either you remove the value or you have the default value. You can have the default value, right? So you can have the default value. Now you say 10,000, 2,000, 3,000, give a 5% tax, click calculate. It is working just fine. It is working. Definitely this solution works, right? But this is no different than this implementation, right? This is no different than, this implementation is no different than this. Why? This is our view. This is where we collect the data, we process the data, we display the data. Now here what we are doing, the salary calculator is our view. This is where we collect all the data, we maintain the data, we process the data, and we display the result. Everything is happening in the same place. Everything is happening in the view itself, right? And I told you, right, we discussed for 3 hours why this is not a good idea, right? So when we keep the data non-UI state in the component, non-UI behavior in the component, we might as well build our application in jQuery. We don't have to build our application in React. We might as well build our application in jQuery. We don't have to build it in React, right? So this is a solution that works, but it is not maintainable. It is not maintainable. Okay, then how do I make it maintainable? What do I do to make it maintainable?
Well, given what you just said, presumably you take the calculation out of the component.
Correct. And where will I keep it?
Well, in some class that isn't a component?
Yeah, exactly. We will use the same model, right? So what we wrote earlier, we will use the same model, same model. So 06 salary calculator hyphen 2. And we wrote the model earlier, right? I will take the same model class. So copy this, go here and paste it, and keeping it in the same model class. And then when I render, right, earlier we saw when you render, what do? We create a view with the model, right? We create a view instance with the model. Now how do I do that here? Simple, we pass it as a prop. So we'll say constant model equal to new salary calculator model, and pass that as a prop here. So model equal to the model, model equal to model. Okay, very good. Now what will I do? I don't want any state. I don't want any state. And on calculate click, I will simply call the model.calculate. So this dot model props dot model.calculate, right? That is what all I will do. Okay, and where will I take this data? This data I will take from this dot props dot model dot to JSON will give me that. As a matter of fact, I will take the model from the props because I need it. This dot props, comma, and this take it from the model dot to JSON, and right, model.2json will get you this. So you automatically display basic HRD and everything. And when the text boxes are changing, what am I supposed to do? We don't set it in the state, right? We don't set it in the state. Instead, what do?
We update
Instead,
them, right?
Exactly. So model dot set of the attribute name, comma, this value. Okay. So this is, remove this goes away. Yep, that's it. That's it. Now save this, go to the browser. This is 06 salary calculator -2.html. We still render the same thing and you say 10,000. Now this is not displaying. This is not displaying. Right? Why? Because if the data is in the state, if the data is in the component state, React will automatically recognize it and re-render the component. If the data is in the component state and when you call set state, React will automatically recognize it and re-render the component, right? But now we decided to keep the state outside the component. We decided to keep the state in a different model. So it becomes our responsibility to recognize when it is changing and re-render the component. So how do I do that? From outside here, what I will do, I will wrap this render in a function. So render calculator. And then call this function once, the first time, so that it is rendered, and then say model.subscribe render calculator. I'm saying that when the model state is changing, render the calculator again, do the whole stuff once again. So even though you render the whole stuff again, right, internally what will happen? Only those DOM nodes that need to be updated will be updated. So we don't have to worry about it. That is taken care by React. So now let's say 10,000, 2,000, 3,000, give a 5% tax and click calculate. It is working just fine. So we are able to solve the same problem using React and make it maintainable, right? And make it maintainable. Guys, are you with me? Right? I'm checking in the code. Take this, have a look at it. Code is checked in.
I'm wondering if now would be a good time to have a break. I need another cup of tea.
Yes. 15 minutes. Okay, everyone in? Am I audible? All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions on this problem that we solved? Okay. Now let us learn component composition, right? So I want to break the components into multiple components, smaller components for better maintainability, right? I want to break the component into smaller components for, I'm sorry, for better maintainability. So what is it? Number one, I want to delegate the responsibility of displaying the result to another component, right? Delegate the responsibility of displaying the result to another component. So how do I do that? Very simple. Take this and make it as another class. So class salary calculator results. Okay. Extends React dot component and then render return this. Okay, but will this component have access to basic HRD and tax and salary? It will not, right? The relationship is association. So in the association relationship, one will not have access to the state of the other. So then what am I supposed to do? You are supposed to explicitly pass them. So we will receive it as data and pass it as a prop. So here I will say salary calculator result, and you can say data equal to data. Any variable name, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be always data. It can be anything. And here we will take the data from the props. So we'll say constant basic, comma HRA, comma DA, comma tax, comma salary is equal to this dot props dot data. Take it and display. Right now, save this. Go to the browser, reload it. Reload it. Let me change the title. Title is a little misleading. So this has to be salary calculator. So save this, go here, reload it, and now you say 10,000, 2,000, 3,000, give a 5% tax, click calculate. It is working just fine, right? So all I did was I refactored the result responsibility of displaying the result. I delegated the responsibility of displaying the result to another component called salary calculator result component. So let me check in this code. So refactoring to result component. Code is checked. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Now, now let us further refactor it. So how do we want to refactor it? Look at this, right? You have this field and this field and this field. You have all these three fields, and they share the same responsibility. So they display a label and they display a text box, and when the data comes, they accept it, right? And so how do we refactor this? How do we refactor this? I don't want the duplications, right? So this concept is same concept is duplicated here, and the same concept is duplicated here as well. So I don't want the concept to duplicate again and again and again. Why? Because when a change comes, I have to change it in 3 different places. So how do I do? On what basis you will decide when to break a component into smaller components? What are the guidelines? What are the parameters? Right? Very simple. All the reasons why you typically break a larger class into smaller classes, all those reasons are applied here. So when you write your application, if you have a bigger class, and if you feel that for various reasons you want to break that one big class into smaller classes, what are those reasons? All those reasons are applicable in component as well. So components are also basically just a class, right? The only more responsibility that they do is they take care of presentation, but other than that, they are also simple objects, they are also classes, right? So here I see that the same responsibility is being carried out by 3 different entities here. So I want to break them into smaller components. So how do I do that? Let's do this. So I will call this as salary calculator inputs, right? Extends React.component. Okay, very good. So what do I want to render? I want to render this stuff. Okay, let me cut this. Cut this, paste it here. So I'll say render return this. Okay, very good. I have returned this. But then if I use this for other parts, right? For this and this, what all will change? This will change, right? So receive this as a prop. So I'll call this as label text. You can give anything, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to use the word label text here. So constant label text is equal to this dot props. Take it from the props and you display. Okay, very good. And then how about this? When the text box is changing, right, we have to update the model. When the text box is changing, we have to update the model. But then, do we have access to the model here? Right? So how will I use this? I will use this as salary calculator input label text is equal to basic. This is how I will use it. Okay. But when the text box is changing, we have to update the model. Do we have access to the model in the salary calculator input? No. Okay, then what will I have to do? Can I pass it as a props? You can, nothing stops you from doing it. But the question is, why should the input component have access to the whole model? Why should the input component have access to the whole model? Right? Then what is the solution? Then what is the solution? So what we can do is, so here, if you look at it, we have the parent component, the salary calculator component. This in turn uses the input component, and the data being accepted by the input component need to be processed by the parent component, right? Need to be processed by the parent component. So how will we do that? Simple. The child component, the input component, can call the parent component and say, "Bus, here is the data that we received. You deal with it. You can take care of handling it." Right? So if this is component A and this is component B, if you look at the relationship, A is using B, association relationship. A is using B. So if A is using B, then A will have knowledge about B. B will not have any knowledge about A. B will not have any knowledge about A. But now B has to communicate to A. So what we can do? The same phone number. So A can give a phone number to B and B can communicate back to A. Is what we are going to implement. So parent expected to ask use that function to communicate data that right on value change. Right, it's our own function name props. It can be anything. It can be XYZ ABC. This can be anything. But I am giving the value the name as on value change. So on value change is when I receive the value. What do I want to do? I want to say model dot set of basic comma the value. Model dot set of basic comma the value. So here we will receive the on value change as well in the child component in the input component, and then when the text box value is changing, he will not set the model because he don't have access to the model. Instead he will call on value change with that particular value. So you call on value change with that particular value, and here you receive it and set it in the model. Okay, very good. Let us check if this is working. So go to salary calculator, reload it, and you type 10,000. It is working just fine. It is working just fine. Okay, very good. Now can I replace HRA also using the same logic? Of course you can. Nothing stops you. So we will take this, paste it, and paste it. So this is HRA, and this is DA, and this is model dot set of HRA, model dot set of DA. Are you with me? Right? Now save this, go to the browser, reload it. It is working. It do the same how it used to work. Right? The only difference is now we have broken them into smaller components called salary calculator input component, salary calculator input, and it takes care of it. Right? So I'm checking in the code. Take this, have a look at it. Code is checked in. Take it, go through it. Let me know once you're done. Any questions?
No, no, fine here.
Okay. All right. Now take the code and modify it in such a way that we bring in the range tags also in the gambit of salary calculator input component. Modify it in such a way that the range, the tags also in the salary calculator input. Do it 10 minutes. Let me know once you're done. Let me know once you are done. Refactor the salary calculator the tax part into the salary calculator input. Refactor it and see what does it take to refactor it, and let me know once you're done. I am waiting. Please let me know. Okay, so one of you have completed it. Others, you have lost the default min values. Okay, others. Pete has done it. Others, guys, are you doing it?
Mine worked. I got it going.
Okay, good. Who else? Okay. So how do you take the min max etc. So simple. Find out what is common, keep it together. What is varying, move them out. Right? What is common, keep them together. What is varying, move them out. So what will vary? This will vary. So I'm going to use the same salary calculator input component and set the label text as tax. Okay, and then on value change, this is model.set of tax. Okay, very good. We can do that. But then how will I pass the min max etc. Right? This are nothing but just props. So pass them as props. Right? To the salary calculator input, pass them as props. And here, what you can do, you can in the salary calculator input component, and one more thing, we also need to pass the type, right? So type equal to range, right? And so here we will receive the type, and if the type is not passed as prop, then we will take number as the default, right? We'll take the number as the default, and then here change this to type. Okay, so this will come. But how about min max, default value, etc.? Those things we will receive as props using the destructuring syntax. So we will, I mean, sorry, this is the rest operator, right? So we are using the rest operator to receive everything else, right? So from the given props, take the label text on value change, see if type is there. If the type is there, take it. If the type is not there, assign default as number, and the rest of the attributes receive it in a variable called attributes, and you spread them out here. So we'll say dot dot dot. What is it? The attributes, right? Dot 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 attributes. That's all. So now this is only the only the button, and it is displaying the data. Okay, very good. Now let's go to the browser, reload it, and let's say 10,000, 2,000. Oh, okay, we'll fix that. So 3,000 and give, why is this not setting? Default value, input type. Oh, sorry. Uh, this, right? That's all, nothing else. So reload it. And now you say 10,000, 2,000, 3,000, give a 5% tax and click calculate. It is working just fine. Right? So we have taken all the props using the rest operator. We received all the props and we are rendering it as it is. Right? I'm checking in the code. Okay. Now, if you look at the salary calculator result component, all it has is a render method. That's all, nothing else. Right? All it has is a render method. Now, should I have to create it as a class? Should I have to create it as a class? Right? You don't have to. If you have only the render method, and if you don't have any state or anything, then you don't have to create it as a class. The render method alone can become a component. Right? The render method alone can become a component. How? Let me take this. Let me comment this out. So, and paste only the render method, the method definition, only the method definition alone, and give a name to that. So instead of render, we will say constant salary calculator result equal to a function, and this function will display this. Okay, very good. But the only thing is, because it's a function, right? You won't have this. The component instance is not created. An instance of the component is not created. So you don't have this. If I don't have this, then how will I have access to the props, right? The props will be given as an argument to this function. The props will be given as arguments to the function. So you can receive the props and you can display. So here the salary calculator result is not a class, it is a function. So these are what we call as higher order components. Okay, so functions that behave like components, right? When you create a component as a function, when you use a function to create a component, then that component is called as a higher order component. Okay, it's called as the higher order component. Now save this. Let us check if this is working. So go to the browser, reload it. It is still working perfectly fine. Right? It is still working perfectly fine. Okay. Now, when you receive these props, you don't have to write it as a separate member and do this. What you can do? You can do this destructuring right here itself. So from the props, you take basic HRDA and salary, and you return this. And now, because this function has only one return statement, you don't have to wrap it inside a block, right? We discussed about arrow functions, isn't it? So you don't have to wrap it inside a block. Just give the expression that has to be returned. Just give the expression that has to be returned. Simple. So you give some data, and this component simply rendering that component, rendering the data. That's all. So reload this, and you say 10,000, 2,000. Oops, why? Why is it not showing? Salary calculator result. From the props, you receive this and you return this. Yeah. Interesting. No data. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Right. My bad. Because this is not coming as props. This is coming as props.data. Right? This is not coming as props. This is coming as props.data. So you can't have it, and it has to be data colon this. Let us see if we receive that. Nope, that will not work. Right, so this will not work. So this has to be a function, because yeah, we receive it from the props.data, Okay, very good. So this will work. Okay, now similarly, let's come here.
Sorry, may I ask a question?
Sure, sure.
I've always understood a higher order component to be a component that wrapped another component, or if you like, a function, I suppose, in this case, that wrapped another component. That's the sense in which it's higher order. So I'm a bit puzzled by this being a higher order component because it doesn't seem to wrap another component. I mean, I may just be wrong. Don't get me right. I don't claim to be an expert, but
no. So the reason why we use the word higher order is in functional programming, we have the higher order functions. We have the concept of higher order functions. So the idea behind higher order functions are the functions, they will not manage any state. They will not depend on any external state. They will operate only on the data given to them, right? And they are what do you call? They maintain referential transparency. Okay, so first I'll tell you one at a time. So let's say we have a function add of x comma y and return x plus y. Right? So this is called as a higher order function because that is a pure function. Okay, so the idea is that you can pass the function as an argument to other functions. You can return the function as return values, right? So if you are able to pass a function as argument to another function, and if you are able to return a function as a return value, those functions are called as higher order functions. And if you are unable to do that, the remaining functions are called as first order functions. So when you are able to use a function as an argument to another function or a function as a return value, those functions are called as higher order functions. And here we are using the function as a component.
yeah, I mean, I guess, like I say, I always understood it to mean you were passing another component. That's why it was a higher order component, just as a higher order function is a function that takes other functions as an argument. I kind of expected a higher order component to be one that took other components as a function, as argument. And that kind of, while you're talking, I had a look at the online, and the React docs do seem to say a higher order component is a function that takes a component that returns a new component. So that does seem to match my understanding.
Oh, yes. You are right. Sorry. So these are functional components. Sorry. One second. That takes a component and returns a new component. Okay. All right. So this is I'm sorry. This is a functional component. Right. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. So the higher order component is, I think, what you get out of the connect API is a higher order component. The React Redux provider, the provider API, the route connect API, so where we pass the component and receive the component back. So we'll discuss about it. These are functional components. These are not higher order components. These are functional components. Okay. And now let us take this. Let's say I want to display an error message. If the text box doesn't contain any data, if the text box doesn't contain any data, I want to highlight the text box and display the error message. Right? And let's say we simply want to highlight the text box, saying that there is an error. Right? If there is no data in the text box, we have to give a border to the text box saying that there is no data in that particular text box. We need to highlight it. So how will we do that? Now let us define a CSS class, call it as error, right? So dot error, and border is 1 pixel, solid red color, and red color, and background color is let's give a value bleach almond, and let us directly assign this and see how it displays. So for the input text box, I will say class name is equal to error, right? Class name equal to error. Now go to the browser, reload it. Now this is how it displays. But I want the style to be applied conditionally, right? If only if it doesn't contain any data, then we want to assign it. Otherwise, we don't want to assign it. So what we can do? So somewhere we need to access this value, right? Somewhere we need to access all this value. Whatever data is entered in the text box, we need to receive it, validate it, and then based on that, we have to define the style. So where can we maintain this value? Where can we maintain this value, right? So it is this data that it is okay to keep it in the component state, right? Because we want to operate on it. We want to decide whether the value is valid or not, right? So it is this data that we can keep it in the component state and validate on it, and then we can decide whether we want to display. If the value is valid, the value is invalid, then we don't have to call the parent component and pass on the data, right? So how will we do that? We can have it right here itself. So I will have the state, and in this particular state, we will take the value. So value is 0, right? Value is 0, and then we will write an on chain right here, and we will say console.log event.target.value. We will see what the value is, and here, right, we'll also have an error member that says it is false, okay, invalid, or I'll call it as invalid. So invalid is false, and when we receive the data from the text box, we will populate it here. So instead of passing all these things, we'll simply say this dot on, what is it, on change, on text change. So I'll say on text change. So on text change, right, we will receive it and keep it here, and take the event object. Now save this, go back, reload it, and let's type something 100 and clear this. What is a value? If there is no data in the text box, what is it? All right, string, that's also a string. So I think it is empty string, right? The value is empty string. So if the value is empty string, then I want to display it as an error message. If the value is not an empty string, then I will retain it as it is. So we will take the value. So constant value as string is equal to event dot target dot value, and if is value as string is equal to an empty string, then what do I want to do? I will say this dot set state of invalid is true, right? Invalid is true. Else we'll say this dot set state of invalid is false, right? And then we will call the parent component and say, boss, this is the data. So we'll say this dot tops dot on value change of what? Event dot target dot value as number, right? Event dot target dot value as number. And here, this class name error should be displayed only if it is invalid, right? So how will we do that? We can use a dynamic expression here. So we will receive that in a, what is it? value comma invalid is equal to this dot state. We'll receive both of them in the state, and then we will display the value equal to the value, and then class name is invalid. If it is invalid, then display error, otherwise just an empty string. You don't have to display any state. Now constant default props. So if you are using the value, you don't need to use the default props. You don't have to pass the default value, right? So you can pass the value as it is. Save this, go here, reload it. It's all 0. Now clear this. It is 0. Why? Because we don't want to display the value. This dot state. State is an empty string. Event.target.value, take it. If the value is changing, this dot set state. Give me a second. So console.log, what is event.target.value? Reload it. 0 0. So it is not getting set. There you go. You don't have to set it, right? So you say 10,000. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so 10,000, 2,000. Now you clear this, go back, type something, clear this, go back. It is displaying that as an error. Okay, so basically these are the reasons why we would want the components to be refactored into smaller components. So here I'm using the salary calculator input to perform some simple data validation and check if the data entered is invalid. If it is invalid, then display display the text box in a particular style to show that it is invalid. If it is valid, then call the parent component and say, boss, this is the valid data. You take it up and process this. Make sense? Right? So now this, we need to make a distinction about what data we can keep in the component as a state, what we should not keep it as a component state, what we should keep outside as the model, right? Or anywhere outside the component. We should not keep them inside the component. We have to keep them outside the component, right? So we'll discuss more about this. And what if we keep the data inside the component? What is the problem? We'll discuss about it. And how do we keep the data outside the component? So the model creation, right? Whatever model that we created today, it has a lot of limitations. It will not help when the application complexity increases. Our model design will not help. Conceptually, it is fine, but implementation wise, our model design will not help. So what we need to do, we need to refine how we create our model, and that will actually help us better understand the purpose and the design of Redux, right? So which is what we will do tomorrow. But is this clear? Any questions?
It's fine. It's fine for me.
Okay, others? Are you following? Okay. Right. Now, is it possible to convert this into a functional component?
Since it's a state, from what you said before, I think the answer is no.
Right. The answer is no. But I want to create a functional component with state. Right. I want to create a functional component with state. How do I do that? And this is where they solve this problem in React-16 using hooks. Okay. So state is a side effect. State is basically a side effect. So any side effects for your component can be implemented as a hook. Right? Any side effects for your component can be implemented as a hook. So for example, so first I'll show you how you can use it, and then we'll discuss about it. So if I want to convert this into a stateless component, I want to convert this into a functional component, right? So how do I do that? Let me comment this out, or let me take it. So here I'll say constant salary calculator input equal to a function, and this will receive the props. Okay, this will receive some props, and it will return this. So let's say this is the props. So I'll take it, paste it here, and this is not this dot props, just the props, and then we will return this. So copy this and then paste it here. Okay, so I'm going to return this. Fine. Now I need to manage some state, right? I need to manage some state. What are the state? Value is one state, invalid is another state. Okay, so how will I manage them? There are three hooks available. So one is called use state hook, the other one is use fx hook, the third one is use reducer hook. Okay, React comes with three hooks, but you can create your own hooks. We'll see some examples tomorrow how we can create our own hooks. So we can create our own hooks, and we can what is it? There are thousands of hooks created by developers like you and me, available as open source, which we can use depending on our need, right? But for today, we will limit our discussion only to the hooks offered by React. Okay, so number one is the hook is use state. So I call react.useState, right? One instance of a state hook can be used to manage one value, right? One state, just one scalar state. So what is that we want to maintain? We want to maintain the value. And what is the default value? The default value is an empty string. So let us create a hook with the default value empty string. And what this will return? This will return an array. This will return an array, and the array will have two members, two indexes, 0 and 1. 0 will have the actual value from the hook, and index 1 will have a setter function using which you can set the value, right? So this is, think of this like set state for value, a setter function for the value state. Okay, a setter function for the value state. Okay, very good. Now a similar thing we have to do it for our invalid as well. So what is it? This is false. So copy this, and here I will say constant, and this is invalid, comma set invalid is equal to react.useState of false. React.useState of false. Okay, very good. So in my application component logic, if I want to use the value, I can directly use the value as it is. If I want to set the value, I can use the set invalid or set value to set the respective values. Okay, very good. Now where is the event handler? the event handler, I can take it and paste it as it is. So we'll say this is constant, a function, and this is an on text change. So it is a normal function. Okay, so it is a normal function on text change, and this will be invoked with the event object. So you get the value, you check if it is an empty string. If it is an empty string, right, this can be replaced with what? Set invalid of true. This is set invalid of true because that is a setter function for invalid state, and this you can say set invalid false, set invalid false, right? As a matter of fact, we don't need this. Am I using it anywhere? I'm not using it anywhere, so I can get rid of this, and here I'll simply call on value change of event.target.value as number. So keep it up. That's it. That's it. Okay, so I'm only using here also. I don't need the value. I don't need the value. I'll commit this out. Okay, so because it manages state, right? We are using the use state hook, and using that you can manage state in a functional component. Now say this, let us check if this is working. Salary calculator, reload it. There is another to say that on text change of undefined on text change. So it is not this dot on text change, it is just on text change. That's all. So there are no component instances there. It is just on text change. So now here you type 10,000, it is working. Clear this, the error is getting displayed. Right? So we are using a use state hook to manage the state within a functional component. So basically it returns an array, and the first member will be the actual value of the state. The second member is a setter function using which you can manage, you can write the value into the state, right? And you can use it for manipulating it. So we have a function that behaves like a component and manages state. So this, if you want, you can receive it as props right here itself. So you don't have to do this. You can receive it as props right here itself. That's it. So this is our salary calculator input component, and the same component what we created using class, we are doing it using function. Okay, so hooks can be used for managing state in a functional component, for managing lifecycle events in functional component, and yeah, for these two reasons. So the benefit is any non-UI concern with respect to the component can be kept out, right? That's the whole idea. Okay, so I'm checking in the code. Take this, have a look at it, and let me know. Code is checked in. Okay, so what are the benefits of functional components? So when you have lifecycle events, right? When you have lifecycle events, let's say you have a component. So you have a class component, and you write some lifecycle events. For example, let's take for example the state. So you have some state values, and you have a component will mount, and then you also write component did mount, right? And then you write component will unmount, right? And you write should the component update, right? So you have all these lifecycle events. Now, when you look at these lifecycle events and what you do with these lifecycle events, right? Point number one is the component's primary responsibility is presentation. Your component's primary responsibility should be presentation, right? This may not be anything to do with the presentation. Whatever you do with the lifecycle event, this may not be anything to do with your presentation. Point number one. Point number two, the logic that you write here, right, may become very, very difficult to test. You need to create an instance of the component in order to test whether they are working the way they are supposed to work or not. The logic that you write in the lifecycle events may become very, very difficult to test. Number two. Number three is the logic that you write in the lifecycle events. You want to use it in another component. What you want to happen in component will mount in one component. You want to use it in another component. The same logic you want to use it in another component. The logic that you write in component did mount, component will unmount, should component update, all this logic, the state management logic. So all these things you want to use it in a completely different component, right? You want to use it in a different component. So when you implement these things as life cycle events in a component class, it becomes very, very difficult to reuse, right? But when you refactor them into a hook, then it becomes very, very easy for you to reuse that logic across different components, because hooks are nothing but functions. Hooks themselves are plain simple functions. So because hooks themselves are plain simple functions, it becomes extremely easy for you to reuse the logic in another components. It becomes easy for you to test that particular logic, right? So these are the reasons why you would go for a hook. So any component, any class component that manages state, that has side effects like using through lifecycle events, can be very easily converted into a functional component with hooks. Did I answer your question? Right. So the of late, right, in the past couple of years, the industry practices that don't create a component as a class. Simple. Don't create the component as a class. Create a component as functions. So automatically, you will not heavily rely upon lifecycle events. That makes your testing your components very difficult. That makes reusing the logic in the lifecycle methods, lifecycle events in other components very, very difficult. So you create them as functional components. And if you want lifecycle events, use hooks. If you want state, use hooks. Right, we'll see one example tomorrow how you can create your own component where you can, your own hook where you can reuse this logic into in other components. All right, good. So this concludes our discussion for the day. If you have any questions, I have time for it. Excellent. Was today's session useful?
Yeah, it was a good start today.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions on how to go about, or we can go with the same flow, the same way?
No, I think it was very good.
We are good? Excellent. Good. So let me know, right? So as I said, remote has a limitation, and we have to address those limitations as and when we feel them, right? Otherwise, it will be the time is not going to be useful for neither of us. So let me know. I am open for suggestions. All right. Good. So we'll meet tomorrow and we'll continue this discussion. So tomorrow our focus will be primarily on Redux. The main topic that we will discuss is on Redux, but whatever is left behind with respect to React, we will discuss them tomorrow and then move on to Redux. Rowan, I don't have, I'm sorry. See, if you look at my delivery model, I don't use any PowerPoints. So I don't have any slides per se. So as I said, at a very high level, we will discuss, we will set the foundation for Redux tomorrow, and most likely we will be completing a small problem with Redux tomorrow. So that is the agenda for tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
We'll meet tomorrow then. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Thanks. Bye.